I've been contemplating in the idea of investing in an Airbnb, but in the end, I'm kind of like trying to figure it out if it's better or more budget friendly to do it in the US or to actually do it outside of the US. At the end, sometimes you get a better bang for your buck if you invest overseas, right? But you're not quite sure as to what to do. How do you build that team? You wonder, how can you actually trust somebody from overseas that you've never seen before? One thing is to invest in another state, but now we're talking another country. How do you get familiar with the regulations and with the rules and how to actually, run a business in a very successful way, especially when it comes to a platform like Airbnb? If that's the dilemma that you're facing right now and you're trying to figure out how to do it the right way, well, let me tell you, you've come to the right episode because we're going to talk about that today. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode at Diversify Invest. If this is your first time tuning into this channel, well, let me tell you, this is your channel for real estate education. So today we're going to talk about Airbnbs overseas, particularly in Mexico. As you can see, we're still in here in this beautiful apartment in Mexico City. And today's episode is actually very special. Earlier today, we had an interview with our host here in Mexico. They're the host of this beautiful apartment and they run an entire portfolio of 17 properties, all Airbnb in Mexico City. And they graciously agreed to participate in an interview with us to share their knowledge, their amazing tips that have worked for them over the last couple of years. And what we're gonna do, we're actually gonna do a quick recap of that interview because we originally had that in Spanish, but we ran out of time. So what I'm gonna do is just to simply run through the same conversation that we have with them for the benefit of all of you, right? So the way the interview started was with a comparison of the before and after the pandemic. How was business before the pandemic, and then how things change afterwards. So as you all know, things were booming before the pandemic came, and the way their portfolio was run is that they were managing a total of 17 units, they still are, with a team of 3 people. And they were mentioning that before the pandemic happened, they were basically just booked all the time because their system was actually based on really good reviews and they have achieved a super host status. But things obviously changed dramatically after the pandemic, not just for them, but for everybody. And they had to learn how to tweak a couple of things here and there in order to just basically stay afloat. I'm sure you've seen in prior episodes where we interview another Airbnb host back in Pennsylvania. And the pandemic basically just forced us to adapt, forced us to evolve in a very rapid way, and it's no different here in Mexico. So what they shared with us was that not only the reservations, they all got canceled after the fact, they also wind up losing money because of what happened with Airbnb. The platform was actually favoring more the customers in itself, more so than the actual host. So they wind up losing a lot of money. Some of those properties that they owned actually had a mortgage, while some of them did not. So one way for them to adapt was just to simply move money around from one property to another so that they could manage to meet their responsibilities, their financial responsibilities with the bank, and still be able to pay the mortgages and not default on those payments. So what they were mentioning was that a few months later, we're now in October, all that drama happened back in June. They pretty much feel confident that they have come back on track. The only difference is the type of customers that they're getting right now. So before, it was mostly people who were just traveling for leisure, trying to get to know Mexico City. Now they're getting more and more people who are looking to work remotely. And I'm sure this is a change that you've seen also back in the US, where you know that you have the flexibility to work from home, and home can be anywhere. It can be outside of New York State. Let's say, for example, if you live in New York, now you can get a bigger house in Connecticut, you can get a bigger house down in Florida. A lot of people are considering the fact that they can just simply travel all over the world and still be able to receive that paycheck without having to worry about showing up to the office. So the clientele that they've been getting post-pandemic has been mostly professional people like us, who basically can run our company from anywhere in the world. We can work remotely now. And now those are the type of people that they're catering. Sometimes they travel individually or maybe are couples, but sometimes they cater to families now who they just simply take their children all over, because school has also become digitized, right? Now they can just simply log on to an online platform and also have access to classes as well. And in terms of pricing, they have to adjust as well because everything dropped, and now because there's very little demand, they have to figure out ways to kind of like attract new customers. One of those ways is by basically adjusting the premium that they were charging. So the nightly rates have actually decreased a lot, but at the same time, they also realize that they need to learn the Airbnb algorithm. Yes, there's such a thing as an Airbnb algorithm, believe it or not. So it's kind of like Google or Facebook or your LinkedIn profile for those who are professional. So they noticed that every time they made an update to their posting, meaning the algorithm in itself of Airbnb is gonna post or push their listing from the very bottom all the way to the top 20. Because at the end of the day, you know, there's a ton of other listings out there. And how do you differentiate yourself, right? How do you make the consumer to look at your posting who could be 10 pages down the road versus the ones that are in the top 20? So that's in essence what they did. They mentioned that every little change that you do to your post, call it changing a picture, call it changing the listing, or maybe making an adjustment, let's say a rate of $200 a night to $199.99, also allow the algorithm to boost your post, and in essence will make you rank at the very top, because I guess the way the algorithm sees it is that you're making changes and you're engaging with the consumer because there's activity in your post in itself, and that pushes your ranking all the way to the top. And they also notice that as there are other people looking at their posting, once they make those changes, there's a higher likelihood to actually rent out your property, because not only they're engaging with you, but also Airbnb tends to recommend that post because there are other people seeing it. In this case, let's say Anthony and I were checking out one of their properties. So if someone else comes in and takes a look at it, there's a higher chance that Airbnb will actually show their posting to the other couple or the other people who are actually looking at it. So that increases your chances to getting your property rent down. So the digital world is here to stay. The pandemic, what it did is just to accelerate it. And our hosts, they did their very best to actually just simply adapt and take advantage of the technology. They didn't have to do anything overly expensive. In particular, they didn't have to promote their posting. They didn't have to pay for any advertising. All they did was just to make smaller upgrades as well. In addition to that, they feature their key themes or key tools that they have available in this apartment. So as you can see, we actually got sold on the internet. Fast speed internet is actually very important to us, but they also mentioned that they offer personalized services for people who are looking to rent out their Airbnb. So let's say, for example, if they're renting out to a family with children and they're traveling and they're arriving late at night and the family is requesting for groceries, they can actually help you get stocked up with any groceries that's needed in the fridge in a way that by the time you arrive with your children, you don't have to worry about, oh, is there a restaurant that is open at this time? Oh, are we going to be able to find a supermarket and make sure that we can find the groceries necessary for our children? No, that's something that they don't have to worry about. So customization is also another thing that they offer in addition to what was already offered. And so they rely heavily on the reviews, but at the same time, they also take a really good advantage of the digitized platform that Airbnb has to offer. Another very interesting thing that I asked them is, how do they do a market research, right? So I'm sure that a lot of you might probably wonder, okay, how do I know what's the right area to invest in, right? So assuming that you have done your Google research, you kind of get an idea what's the right neighborhood for you to invest. Now the next stage is, what is it that my client or my customer is going to need in this case? So a very interesting exercise that they put in practice was actually to live in the Airbnb. So every time they got a new Airbnb available to add to their portfolio, they will decorate it in a way that it's family friendly, but at the same time, it will cater to the majority of the audience as possible, right? So let's say, for example, if you're renting out an Airbnb with a kitchen, they will live here a month or two just to make sure that they understand what the needs are. What is it that the neighborhood has to provide, so that way they're familiar. And hey, you know what? They like to cook, but a couple of pots is not enough. Maybe I need to bring in a couple of extra dishes, or maybe a couple of set of knives, just to make sure that they have everything that's needed. A water filter. Every single little detail that they managed to set in place in this beautiful apartment was the byproduct of them residing in here before they even rent it out. So that way they understand what type of customers to cater that to, and what is it that it's needed to their customer. So that's their way to conduct their market research. Every single one of us has different ways to do it. We, for example, Anthony and I like to do it online, but hey, we never thought of the idea, hey, perhaps if you want to run an Airbnb, maybe you should live in there just to make sure that your client, your customer has everything that's needed. The right amount of towels, the right amount of soap, the right amount of dish liquid soap, whatever is it that your neighborhood dictates, or whatever is it that you think your client will need in that particular neighborhood, you can anticipate that by just simply residing in there a couple of months. So that way you can have everything that's needed readily available in the apartment or in the property that you're planning to use for Airbnb purposes. So another topic of conversation was on return on investment, right? So as some of you may know, Airbnb can be quite profitable if you do it right. However, it is a lot of work, right? Most people think that having an Airbnb entails just simply posting your property in an Airbnb and collecting money from that rental, but it's more than that. Having an Airbnb involves coordinating scheduling, coordinating cleaning services, coordinating that the families that are leaving are not bumping into the family that's about to come in. And it's also coordinating availability if the families or if your client is actually showing up late. Sometimes people take night flights and they don't show up until very late hours at night. How do you ensure that they get the proper access into your property in itself, right? So we were asking, okay, I mean, it's obviously that you get a high return of investment, but is there any other reason why you prefer to invest in Airbnb as opposed to all the other type of investments out there? So what they shared with us was information that was very localized. So two of the hosts, they also have other businesses. So one of them has a printing business and the other one is a designer. And they mentioned that one of the things that they dislike about doing business in Mexico is that for the most part you have to provide for your services first and then you build the customer, and the customer doesn't always pay, or it doesn't always pay it on time. So Airbnb sort of like contains the best of both worlds. It is a business that is active. The more active the business, ideally, you expect to make more money off of it. But with the difference is that with Airbnb, you get to charge beforehand. You get to collect the money beforehand. And unless your client or your customer pays for the reservation beforehand, no way you're gonna book the apartment and make it readily available for them. So that's one of the many reasons why they like that a lot. And it also allows them to diversify risk. So out of the portfolio of 17 properties, some of them they do own, some of them they do lease. And with that lease, they ended up subleasing it so that way they can do Airbnb with it as well. Now, this is a topic that you should look into if you plan to do this in the US, because most leases, they do not allow you to do subleasing. So definitely something that you should consider. Apparently in Mexico, some properties do allow you to do subleasing. So that's definitely something that they do here. And they also manage property for other investors. So they have a percentage of property that they own, that they have a mortgage, and they have to, make sure that every month they're meeting with their financial responsibility. The other properties, they're just simply paying out a lease, and with whatever they rent out, it will cover the lease that they're paying the actual owner, and whatever is left of it, they actually make money off of it. And in terms of property management, my understanding is that they charge a certain percentage, just like in the US. will charge. That's the least profitable one, but at the same time, it's the one that carries the least amount of risk. Why? Because you're not owning that property. All you gotta do is collect, and if you're not renting it out, you don't get to collect on anything, but if you are renting it out, then you're collecting a percentage off of it. So definitely a very smart way to diversify that portfolio. And within that conversation, we talked about the number 3 and 17, right? Why exactly 17 properties and why exactly 3 members? So in that conversation, the topic of teamwork came about, right? And it's also not so much about the quantity. Most people think, oh, the more property we have, the better. Sometimes it could be, but if you're not managing it properly, then it becomes a fiasco, right? So they have come to the conclusion that 17 properties is the exact amount of numbers that they can manage efficiently amongst 3 people. In fact, they even mentioned that they had to get rid of a couple of other clients because it was too much for them to manage. And they care more about customer service. They care more about the reviews and the experience that the customer will get out of that stay and that Airbnb of theirs versus the amount of money that they could possibly be making. So it actually sounded very similar to the concept of Amazon. Amazon, it's all about the client. It's all about customer satisfaction. The customer needs to be happy, because if the customer is happy, then they're gonna come back, right? And if they keep coming back to the same vendor, then the Amazon platform will keep boosting you. And that's in essence the same that's happening with Airbnb. So the more positive reviews that you're getting in the Airbnb platform, the more the algorithm is going to start pushing you so you can go ahead. And in terms of numbers, we're going to cover that in a few. But first, if you're enjoying this episode, do not forget to hit the like button right here so you can help this episode rank and help others like you who are looking for this type of information. So moving along, in terms of team members, there are exactly 3 people, right? So one is in charge of the operations. The other 2, they're actually a couple, but they are 3 people, but they work hand in hand. So my understanding is that the way they operate is that the responsibilities are split out 50-50, but sometimes if this person is on vacation, the couple, Abril and Rodrigo, they will take the responsibilities all together. So one person, her name is Susana. Susana is in charge of anything that's related to operations. So anything that has to do with access to the building, checking that all the apartments are getting hot water, any day-to-day necessities, Susana is in charge of it. Rodrigo is in charge of the accountings, running the numbers, making sure all the properties have enough budget to keep running around. And Abril is in charge of pretty much a little bit of everything, but she mainly focuses on decorating the apartment. So as you can see, she's done a pretty good job because their properties are beautiful and very nicely decorated. It's something that definitely makes you want to stay here and keep coming back. So if I were to narrow it down as to what makes them to be a good team, is the diversity of thought, right? So there are 3 people, they're somewhat different from one another and they complement one another. So while one person specializes in something, the other person specializes in something else, right? That's something that sometimes companies do not get. They tend to want to hire people who think like them, who act like them. And the reality of the matter is, if you hire someone who is exactly like you, then you are ignoring some other things that you have not considered because that person thinks exactly like you. And not just that, even if they think similar to the way that you think, chances are sometimes you might want to do things differently, and that's when the head bumps start to happen, right? The disagreements start happening. This is something that it doesn't happen, right? And in addition to the diversity of thought, they have different schedules. So Susana is in charge of the day-to-day activities, and Rodrigo and Abril, they take care of everything at night. So that way the other person still has enough time to get some rest, recharge her energy, and then come back the very next day. And then Rodrigo and Abril, they will still have enough time to do whatever is it that they need to do, take care of the other businesses so that they are available to take care of whatever need that their customers may have. And then as we moved along, we got into the topic of attracting quality customers, because at the end of the day, we all want to deal with people that are pleasant to deal with and not someone who gives us a headache, especially if you're renting out a property that's fully furnished. I mean, some of us, we're afraid that getting a bad tenant could destroy their properties, and we're only talking about the actual walls or the hallways. Now with an Airbnb portfolio, you have to worry not just only about the walls, but you're also worrying about the table, the bed, whatever furniture that you place in that apartment. That becomes, in a way, something that could be damaged, and it could be a liability as well. So we were wondering, how do they actually manage that? So in our experience, and this is just pertaining to their portfolio in itself, so they were mentioning that they have premium residences, right? So they don't do middle income class or low income class. They do high-end properties that tend to attract a clientele that is willing to pay more. And in their experience, when the client has the purchasing power to pay more, they tend to take good care of stuff, because chances are in their home, they probably have something that's better than whatever is it that they're providing in here. And for the naysayers, they actually showed us, or they shared with us, a little experiment that they did. And so they were talking about the very first Airbnb that they had, and it was basically with old furniture that they had, but it was nicely taken care of. They actually put a property together, and they put old furniture, and they rented it out at a premium fee because of the area, because of the location. And they realized that because of the type of client or customer that they were attracting, the property and the furnitures in itself were left spotless. If anything, now they're realizing that because of the changes that they had to do with Airbnb, and in order to attract more clientele, they ended up lowering the premium just so that it could become more accessible for other people who are willing to travel. So that way, at least they can have some type of income as opposed to just no income at all. And in their experience, they're noticing that once they lowered the premium that they were charging, they realized that the quality of customers were not the same. They were more careless, and at the same time, they demand more. They demand more, and they created, some minor wear and tear damages, which is, it comes with the territory, it comes with the business. But they were surprised to see that there was a big difference in the quality of people from before pre-pandemic at very high rates versus the quality of people that they were renting it out today at a much lower premium. And lastly, the conversation ended in how they expanded, how they got started, right? Because we all are eager to get started, we're all eager to make things happen, but getting that first client, it's always very difficult. So we wanted to pick on their brain, and we were asking, hey, how did you do it? How did you get that first customer? So in the end, it's all about networking, right? It's all about having a power team, the people that you hang out with that will ultimately become your next business partner or not. So they did the test, right? They started pulling Airbnbs together with their own money and their own furniture. And as they were attending different gatherings, whether with friends or perhaps networking, one person led to another. That's the power of the network. So one person started asking, oh, what is it that you do? And then they started talking about, oh, we do Airbnb, and this is how we manage our project. Next thing you know, the same people within that network was like, oh, you know what? I have 2 properties over here. I was wondering if you can actually manage it for me. In fact, I actually want you to manage it for me. Please, 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 please. So that goes to say that when you're doing something right, and when your numbers are proving that you're doing something right, there's not much that you need to do to really sell yourself, because the results show. People are looking, whether you are aware of it or not. People are looking at you. People see that you're successful. People see that you're doing things right. And when you're doing things right, it's just simply you start attracting quality people, you start attracting quality customers. And as a living proof is the portfolio that they hold nowadays. So for those who are actually very interested in checking it out, I'm gonna make sure I leave the link down below to the apartment that we're staying right now, which is gorgeous and beautiful. And also we're gonna leave the link down below to Rodrigo and Abril's listings, which are all throughout Mexico City, so you can definitely check them out. And why not perhaps book a stay here so that you can come and enjoy some of their beautiful properties and also the nice culture that you get to enjoy here in Mexico City. So that's pretty much all I have for you today. Hopefully you enjoy it. And while I still have you here, do not forget to check this episode right here. That's going to help you complement everything you just learned today. And until then, I'll see you guys next time. Take care. Bye-bye.